Tonight, Mark Carney's big bet on fast-tracking big projects.
The first principle of these projects is it's in the interests of Canada.
7 initiatives in energy and mining, Ottawa says, will boost Canada's tariff-hit economy. The pushback and the politics at issue is standing by. A new clue as to what is behind the rising rates of cancer in young adults.
You think, what else could I have done? Why am I now getting this diagnosis?
The new research pointing to ultra-processed foods. And CBC Marketplace crunches the data on thousands of commutes across Canada.
It's hell on wheel for these commuters.
Find out which is the worst and the potential solution to cut congestion.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. Tonight, 7 new infrastructure projects are heading to the federal government's Major Projects Office in hopes of speeding up their development. They are all rooted in energy and mining and located all over the country, from BC to New Brunswick. The Prime Minister is calling them transformational projects. He says will help make Canada prosperous and resilient in the face of U.S. tariffs. This is the second batch to head to the Major Projects Office. Kate McKenna walks us through what's on the list.
Prime Minister Mark Carney says fast-tracking major projects can take Canada's economy from potential to powerhouse.
Let me talk a bit about those projects and what they're here for. They're here to reinforce our nation.
He's recommending another slate of initiatives to the Major Projects Office, hoping to boost private investment and cut red tape to get big things built faster.
That's because the world, U.S., is changing rapidly. And so we must change our strategy dramatically.
New projects include a transmission line and LNG project in British Columbia, a hydro project in Iqaluit, and critical mineral mines in Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick.
Today's announcement that the Sisson mine has been added to the major projects list as a project of national interest is a clear sign of the major role that New Brunswick can play in the Canadian economy.
Also on the list, a new corridor to build up infrastructure between northwest British Columbia and the Yukon, home to vast deposits of critical minerals.
It sends a signal to the federal bureaucracy. This is a priority.
All of this is part of a push to turbocharge the Canadian economy amid U.S. trade turmoil.
We're in a situation because of all these changes in the world that many of our historic strengths, based on close ties with the United States, have become our vulnerabilities.
We kind of had a lost decade where we really weren't focusing on the economy. So I think the government is headed in the right direction.
But work is already well underway for these projects, prompting questions about exactly what needs to be fast-tracked.
Our job is all about making sure that people get across the line, get everything they need to get built on time and on budget.
Having that referral to the MPO status, should again put us at the front of the line in terms of, working through specific permits.
So if the federal government gets out of the way, we can get these things done.
But the Conservatives have long said the better approach would be dropping regulations slowing development in the first place.
The problem? Too much bureaucracy. Mark Carney's solution? Add another bureaucracy.
One glaring omission from this list, a pipeline for Alberta. Premier Danielle Smith says she's still working to hammer out some sort of deal with Ottawa, and there could be an update in the coming days.
Okay, so Kate, so far, none of the announced projects have received a national interest designation that would exempt them from certain environmental laws.
No, the federal government passed a law earlier this year to be able to override laws to build projects faster. To date, that tool hasn't been used, so Carney hasn't really tested the limits of what's acceptable to Canadians. There's some opposition to this latest LNG project. That could be a test case before more controversial projects are added to the list.
Okay, we will be watching. Kate McKenna in Ottawa. So let's take a closer look at that LNG project being planned along the BC coast to export millions of tons of liquefied natural gas to Asia. Yasmin Renea with why some Indigenous communities and environmentalists say it should not go ahead.
It's a contentious plan not being welcomed by all. I am specifically opposed to Ksi Lisims LNG.
That's the multi-billion-dollar liquefied natural gas project Prime Minister Mark Carney is now recommending for fast-track approval.
LNG can help Canada build new trading relationships, especially in fast-growing markets.
A new generation of LNG production is on the horizon.
Ksi Lisims LNG is a proposed floating facility in Nisga'a Nation territory in northwest British Columbia that would be capable of exporting 12 million tons of liquefied natural gas a year, mostly to Asia. The project is being developed in a partnership between the Nisga'a, Rockies LNG, and Western LNG, which is based in Houston, Texas, and is being challenged in court by two nearby Indigenous communities over environmental and land claim concerns.
We, as hereditary chiefs, we have a right to protect that. We have a right to protect the future.
Proponents of the project maintain it will be cleaner than other liquefaction plants because it will be largely powered by hydroelectricity. But some say it pushes Canada in the wrong direction.
I see this as a liability for our nation. It's not a nation-building project because this is a very risky project. We're expanding LNG capacity at the very time when the world is entering a glut, when renewables have become incredibly cheap.
This is the second BC LNG initiative to be referred to the Major Projects Office. It's also not the first time the federal government has been criticized for inadequate consultation with Indigenous groups, something Carney says is key.
There are many parties, and all of those parties have to be taken into account.
If approved, the project could begin operations in late 2028 or 2029 and aims to be net zero ready by the end of the decade. Yasmin Ghanea, CBC News, Vancouver.
So what does the at-issue panel make of what is and is not on this latest group of major projects? Rosie and the team will go through it all in about 20 minutes. Well, the federal government is clarifying a change to disability pensions. It now says veterans' pensions won't be impacted. On Tuesday, the Veterans Affairs Minister told CBC News the federal budget included changes to how payments are calculated for veterans. Veterans feared they'd get less money. Now the Finance Minister's office says the change would only apply to RCMP members, not to the Canadian Armed Forces. And the head of CSIS singled out China and Russia today as he warned that foreign states are collecting intelligence in Canada's Arctic.
Russia, an Arctic state with a significant military presence in the region, remains unpredictable and aggressive.
Dan Rogers says those countries want inside information on the governments and businesses developing that region's strategic potential. The agency shares what it knows with Indigenous and territorial leaders so they can use caution when dealing with foreign companies. Well, Donald Trump has been unusually quiet after his name appeared in emails from late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's estate. There's no evidence of wrongdoing on Trump's part, but as Katie Nicholson explains, the push in Congress for more documents related to Epstein is far from over.
As Donald Trump signed the bill to reopen government on the same day his name popped up in emails from convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's estate.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if you have questions.
Mr. President! There were questions.
Mr. President, can you respond to these Epstein emails that were released today?
Just no answers. Then, at an event with the First Lady, not a word responding to the release of more than 20,000 documents. And not a peep about the House vote next week pushing to release the Department of Justice's files on Epstein. Trump had a long-standing friendship with Epstein that soured in 2004.
I'm not a fan of Jeffrey Epstein.
He has consistently denied any wrongdoing connected to his old friend. And while he has been uncharacteristically mum before the cameras, on social media, he lashed out at the Jeffrey Epstein hoax and suggested only a very bad or stupid Republican would fall into that trap.
Sir, with all due respect, this is not a hoax.
Epstein survivor Haley Robson wants the president to release the DOJ's files.
The cat is out of the bag and the cat is not going back in the bag. So I'm not going away. The other survivors, my survivor sisters, they're not going away.
The so-called Epstein files, quite different from Wednesday's deluge of emails from Epstein's estate. The DOJ's Epstein files from its sprawling sex trafficking investigation. It includes photos, videos, and child sex abuse materials. and potentially the answers survivors have been seeking for so long, says this lawyer.
We need to see what's in the actual files from the government, the FBI, the people that were in charge of preventing this kind of activity, to actually find out who knew what, when, who was aware of it, and who didn't do anything.
Even if the bid to release the files passes the House, it may not make it past the Republican-held Senate, with the outrage of survivors likely to continue. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
The BBC has apologized to Donald Trump for editing together different parts of his January 6th Capitol riot speech in a documentary. The head of the British public broadcaster sent a personal letter to the White House to apologize. The BBC says the edit gave a mistaken impression the president called for violent action. Trump threatened to sue for $1 billion in damages, but the broadcaster said it rejects the basis for a defamation claim. The streets of the U.S. Capitol were once again bustling with a morning rush as federal employees returned to work after the longest government shutdown ever.
Great to be able to get back into the swing of things and really return to the work I love doing.
Thousands of non-essential workers had been furloughed for 43 days while their essential counterparts worked without pay. The shutdown saw travelers stranded at airports and people lining up at food banks. Well, a new study may help explain the rising rates of colorectal cancer in younger adults. It links an increased risk with eating ultra-processed foods. Lauren Pelly brings us the findings and the health advice tonight.
It's fast, it's easy, but ultra-processed food might be a major health threat. A new study published Thursday in a cancer journal looked at 30,000 women over 2 decades. It found a link between eating a high level of ultra-processed foods and developing colorectal polyps.
And these are the kinds of polyps that we believe are the main precursor lesion to the vast majority of early onset colorectal cancers. So it does provide us.
The lead researcher says the finding offers a key clue to what's behind an alarming trend, the rise in young adults developing colorectal cancer.
We did expect that there might be some associations here, given that we are also seeing dramatic increases in our consumption of ultra-processed food.
It's a big category of foods that are both highly processed and full of preservatives, items like mass-produced bread, many breakfast cereals, or instant soup.
So ultra-processed food is sort of that ready-to-eat, ready-to-heat type food.
This Toronto oncologist praised the new study and said these products have long been known as less healthy options.
They don't contain a lot of fiber, they have sort of the bad types of fats in them.
Still, this new finding isn't clear cause and effect. More research is needed to see where ultra-processed foods fit alongside other well-known cancer risk factors, like obesity and a lack of physical activity. Joshua Kluskovic hopes scientists figure it out. The 34-year-old doesn't know what caused his stage 4 colon cancer, which has spread to his liver, lungs, and bones.
You're trying to stay as positive as you can, just hoping for a miracle to happen.
After years of trying to lead a healthy lifestyle, he still has more questions than answers.
You think, what else could I have done? Why am I now getting this diagnosis?
Doctors and dietitians say one thing is clear: avoid ultra-processed foods as much as you can, and when possible, choose whole, fresh foods instead. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's outgoing ambassador to the UN gave his final speech there today and spoke about the difficulty of taking a courageous stand.
But the thing we know about courage is that it is infectious. If some stand up, then others will stand up.
Bob Rae was appointed in 2020 by Justin Trudeau. The former NDP Ontario Premier and interim leader of the federal Liberals recently reflected that his own father, Saul Rae, had held the same post at the UN, appointed by Pierre Trudeau. Well, a city in Ukraine is teetering towards Russian control tonight. Pokrovsk is in the Donetsk region, and both sides want it for strategic importance. Briar Stewart shows us how a year-long battle has taken a terrible toll.
Through the fog, a glimpse of battleground Pokrovsk, a strategic Ukrainian city, barren, bleak, and on the brink.
There are much more Russians than there was before. Several hundreds of them are in the city.
We are only identifying this Ukrainian drone operator by his military call sign, Goose. For nearly a year, he's had an aerial view of Pokrovsk as Ukraine has been trying to stop Russian soldiers from pushing further.
Almost all of the city now is a gray zone. It is not controlled by our side or the Russian side.
With skies saturated by drones, it's too risky to bring in large military equipment. So troops make the last part of the journey by walking around 10 kilometers.
It's very difficult for our troops because the Russians has the advantages, at least in the quantity of the infantry.
Volodymyr Poilievre estimates that the ratio of Russian troops to Ukrainians in this area is about 5-1. Russia has long sought the city of Pokrovsk, which had a population of 60,000 before the war. Now officials estimate 1,000 civilians remain. Russia is trying to encircle Pokrovsk and cut off access to the nearby city of Mirnohrad. It's part of a goal to seize an even greater chunk of Ukraine's Donetsk region.
We have to hold this position as many times as we need, as we can.
To the southeast in the Zaporizhia region, Russia is also trying to press forward. Police are rushing to evacuate residents while they can, fearing they could be trapped as the front line inches closer. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Palestinians in the occupied West Bank say Israeli settlers defaced and set fire to a mosque. Residents say worshippers found the door open and discovered the fire inside, and then were able to summon emergency crews to put it out before it consumed the mosque. Outside, the walls were scrawled with anti-Islam messages as well as "wreak vengeance on his foes" and "we are not afraid of Avi Blot." That's the Israeli commander in charge of the area who recently condemned the surge in settler violence. Well, a constitutional challenge is about to move forward in BC, arguing drug users have a charter right to a safe supply.
I can't stand the thought of my friends going to jail for this.
What the Fifth Estate has unveiled about Health Canada's handling of the opioid crisis. Russia's first AI-powered robot stumbles out of the gate. And a Nova Scotia man conquers a grueling trail in memory of his father.
I had all those people watching and donating. I knew I couldn't let them down.
We're back in 2.
Stéphane Albertini, Nick Alexander.
One by one, those are victims' names being read aloud as French President Emmanuel Macron joined Parisians in paying tribute to the 90 people killed inside the Bataclan nightclub 10 years ago today. The massacre was one of a series of attacks that day by ISIS gunmen and suicide bombers who killed 130 people. Canada's opioid crisis has killed tens of thousands of people, but advocates claim there were untapped solutions. Stephen D'Souza, co-host of The Fifth Estate, reveals how Health Canada ignored advice from its own experts, which some say could have saved lives.
For TJ Felix, every day brings the risk of death. A chronic drug user, they started using a dangerous mix of fentanyl and methamphetamine 2 years ago, after losing access to a safe alternative to the toxic street supply.
I was overdosing like upwards of twice a day.
Felix was a member of DOLF, the Drug User Liberation Front. The Vancouver Compassion Club was co-founded by Jeremy Calicum in response to the rising number of opioid overdose deaths. In 2022, Health Canada denied their application for an exemption to federal drug law, so DOLF bought illicit drugs on the dark web, tested, and then sold uncontaminated heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine to a select group of users.
People really just had no resources or way to keep themselves safe.
But in 2023, Calicum was arrested and charged with drug trafficking. Now a Fifth Estate investigation has found the same year Dolph was shut down, Health Canada ignored recommendations from its own experts to expand access to more prescription opioids and stimulants, and for the government to consider legal and regulated compassion clubs and retail stores.
Disappointing, compromised, and just maintaining the status quo of which was thousands of people dying.
Last week, a BC court found Dolph's founders guilty of drug trafficking. They're now fighting back, arguing drug users have a charter right to a safe supply.
We think there's a real constitutional issue here that needs to be addressed if we're ever going to get to the point where we don't have thousands of people dying every year from preventable deaths.
I can't stand the thought of my friends going to jail for this, for saving lives. I'd be dead 10 times over if it wasn't for them.
This past spring, federal funding for safe supply programs ended. Health Canada says it was just one of many options, and that they consulted with a number of others, including their expert advisory group. They also confirmed to the Fifth Estate no new federal money is coming for safe supply. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
You can stream the Fifth Estate's investigation, The War on Safe Drugs, right now on YouTube, or watch it Friday at 9 p.m. on CBC Television and GEM. Well, Marketplace has tracked down Canada's worst commutes along with a potential fix.
Instead of spending an hour stuck in traffic, they're saving 20 minutes.
Could an added fee ease congestion? After the break, Rosie's here with that issue.
Hey, Adrian, tonight we're going to talk about the government's new round of major projects.
We must change our strategy dramatically. And we're doing that by drawing on our legacy as builders.
So what does this tell us about Mark Carney's priorities for the country? Will they transform the economy? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and more.
And that was a successful launch for Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket on its debut flight for paying customers. The giant spacecraft is carrying 2 NASA satellites eventually headed for Mars. In a remarkable first, the company recovered its reusable booster, which landed on a nearby barge, something it was unable to do during January's test flight. So there are tech wins and then there are tech stumbles, like when your AI robot face plants in front of a crowd. Oops. Needless to say, it was a tough debut in Moscow for Russia's very first humanoid robot. It seemed to lose its balance after just trying to wave to the audience, leaving its assistants to drag it away and try to cover up the whole scene. Well, CBC Marketplace has examined some deep data to come up with the top 10 worst commutes in Canada. Solving those snarls could involve some tough politics. But co-host Chris Glover starts us off with one very unlucky driver.
Some 500,000 people drive this daily, Canada's busiest highway, Ontario's 401.
I make this trip. I've been making it for 8 years.
8 years you've been doing
this? It has been getting worse.
The clogged highway is the worst part of Michaela Helliwell's 2-hour commute.
We just came to a complete standstill.
All right, so you can have a stretch now, hands off the wheel.
She responded to a Marketplace call-out.
The worst commute has got to be in Edmonton.
One of hundreds arguing they have Canada's worst commute.
It is always jammed up in the morning.
A University of Toronto research team tracked thousands of drives across the country, finding the average rush hour delay. So Marketplace could determine Canada's top 10 worst commutes, which include Montreal, Vancouver, and number 1, Oakville, Ontario to Toronto.
The 2 main reasons why all of these commutes are slow are compounded here. You have interchanges, many exit roads that create bottlenecks, so it's hell on wheel for these commuters.
This expert says a new fee on key routes would reduce demand during peak hours.
I think congestion pricing is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's inevitable.
In January, congestion pricing was set up in New York City.
Drivers have suddenly become supporters of congestion pricing because instead of spending an hour stuck in traffic, they're saving 20 minutes.
But in Canada, provincial governments must approve new highway charges.
Why is your government dead set against it?
It's something that we just absolutely fundamentally disagree with.
Beyond adding a congestion price, in the past few years, premiers in Ontario, Nova Scotia, and British Columbia removed tolls. Talking to motorists, you understand why.
I don't want to pay a toll. Cost of living is really expensive here.
I wouldn't, because I blame government for allowing too much growth in the area without any planning.
And regardless of what the data says,
There you go. An hour and 50 home.
people like Helliwell feel like they have the worst commute in the country. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
For the full investigation, you can watch Canada's worst commute on Marketplace Friday night at 8:30 in Newfoundland on CBC TV and CBC Gem. Now, let's break down the news shaping our world. Tonight, Rosie's here with that issue.
At issue tonight, Canada's major projects. The Prime Minister unveils the next round of nation-building projects that he says will help transform the Canadian economy.
The first principle of these projects is it's in the interest of Canada. Not every aspect, not every project, not every mine will go forward because people have to be behind them and they have to be the right ones.
So what do these new projects tell us about Mark Carney's vision for Canada? How likely are they to be greenlit and completed? I'm Rosemary Barton here to break it all down tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. Andrew Coyne, I'm going to start with you tonight. What do you make of this second tranche of projects and sort of what they tell you about what, or don't tell you about what the government's trying to do here?
Well, I'm particularly impressed by it as a public relations exercise. You know, by going this route, they've been able to convert the conversation around climate change from saying no to projects that had oil and gas involved to saying yes to projects that are more in line with the government's climate change agenda. I think that's smart politics. They are now in the business of building rather than obstructing building, even if they're projects selected to their designs. These are not necessarily, and I'm sure Althea will make this point at greater length, these are not necessarily projects, quote unquote, of national interest, but they are projects that are going to go through the major project office and be basically given the concierge service, and that reflects the government's priorities. Yeah,
they are, just so people understand, they're projects that are referred to the office, but they haven't necessarily been greenlit, which is what the Prime Minister is kind of referring to there. And you wrote a lot about this today, Althea.
Well, basically, when this Majors Projects Office was set up, it was made to support the great Building Canada project of Mark Carney from last June. And we spoke about it at the time. The government basically gave itself unprecedented powers that if it listed a project as a national interest project, it could basically clear the way legislatively and through regulation and through study by ignoring a whole bunch of laws on the books and regulations on the books and picking and choosing what laws to apply and giving a whole bunch of power to cabinet and to one minister specifically. What the Toronto Star has learned, what I wrote about, was that none of the projects so far have actually been listed as national interest projects. So there was no need to have this huge rush, this unprecedented piece of legislation that kibosh Parliament's rights. The only person who seems to want to use this bill at the moment is Pierre Poilievre, who has talked about it to build the Northern Gateway pipeline, to build 15 to 16 massive LNG terminals on BC's coast. These are like kind of two separate things, but one thing I did notice from today's announcement, perhaps the government will use this unprecedented law on the books, but Mark Carney never said the word national interest project today. He just talked about referring it to the Majors Projects Office, and my reporting has shown that actually most of what the project proponents want is money, and that is what Mark Carney is giving them. He is giving them the certainty to private investors by saying these are the projects the government wants to see built, and in this budget, he's also giving the infrastructure bank a whole bunch of money so that they can invest in these projects.
Though just because they haven't exempt the projects from the laws and regulations doesn't mean that they won't, right? That
No, it doesn't. But they said they could not be. This bill could not be studied. It was studied in a day and a half.
Okay.
It was like so crucial. We had to get this done, and they haven't used it.
Chantal, your thoughts?
A lot of the projects I'm thinking to start with the first batch do not need any laws to be lifted. I was talking to people from the Montreal Port Authority. They have a project that was in the first batch. So I asked them, so that this Major Projects Bureau get in touch with you? And they said, well, actually, we don't need very much from them because we'd already cleared all the regulatory hurdles. What they're basically doing for us is speeding up conversations at the federal level. Okay, I'm not saying that's bad, but it goes to Althea's point. My impression is that looking at the projects to date, I don't think very many of them require interprovincial cooperation, for instance. They're all, for the most part, very much localized in one province. And from that, and then in the real world, that would not necessarily make them worthy of the title of national interest projects. But I suspect that up to a point, the government is using those projects to road test its system, but also to tread water while it gets those bigger projects. I'm thinking the train between Quebec City and Toronto, for instance, or the transmission line between Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec. None of these projects are ready to get off the drawing board, but those would be, or a pipeline to the West Coast, projects of national interest that would possibly require Bill C-5. But I think the government wants to show action, and it's using those projects to give the sense that there's momentum behind the initiative. But that is, I agree with Andrew, it's great public relations.
I mean, it does seem as though the further we get down the list, to Chantal's point, Andrew, the harder it's going to be to get some of these things across the finish line. And we should say that they're working on some sort of MOU, some sort of memorandum of understanding with Alberta, where apparently the Alberta government believes there'll be some sort of language around a pipeline.
We shall see, but it is remarkable that you unveil a list of projects that doesn't include a pipeline and you don't have a blow up from Alberta. So they are at least talking. And they seem to have convinced Alberta Premier Danielle Smith that they're at least serious enough that she can keep talking to them. We shall see whether they come to agreement, because, you know, you could argue that Alberta has a vested interest in wanting to keep, her premier, I should say, has a vested interest in wanting to keep, you know, a bit of a feud going with the federal government. So can they agree on terms that take away that foil for her? At some point, yeah, if it's enough in terms of improving the Alberta economy, it'll be worth it. But there's bargaining to be done on both sides that way.
Althea,
it's not just.
Sorry, go ahead, Chantal, and then I'll
just, It's not just finding common ground with Alberta. It's finding common ground with Alberta while keeping Cabinet and caucus united
and BC,
behind
and BC
whatever
too.
results from that, and BC. And Indigenous communities. So it's easy enough to say, well, you know, let's do the pipeline that Alberta wants. But is it politically feasible? I'm not convinced.
Yeah, Althea.
The most interesting thing to me has been the timing of these announcements. They did not need to announce the LNG terminal today. And in doing so, they may have lost Green Party leader Elizabeth May's vote. They may have lost some NDP votes in favor or some abstentions. My understanding was basically up until a few days ago, it wasn't clear when this MOU was going to be announced. I think, thankfully, for members of the Liberal caucus, the MOU is not going to be announced before the Monday budget vote. But at the moment, the Liberals do not have the votes to get their budget across, unless there is some closely guarded secret with some floor crossers that we have not heard a whiff about. It is not clear how they survive, and they have just made their job harder with this announcement and Mark Carney musing last Friday that Danielle Smith is getting a pipeline or something like it.
Okay. We will leave this part there. Thank you all for that beginning of the conversation. When we come back, we'll talk about how Pierre Poilievre is responding to one of his MPs crossing the floor and one of them resigning.
I'm very saddened for the Nova Scotia families on whom Mr. Carney and Mr. d'Entremont are raising the price of groceries and homes.
So how are the Conservatives, how is the leader responding to the loss of two MPs? How is he trying to turn the page? That's next. At issue, Pierre Poilievre. After two MPs left his caucus, the Conservative leader was asked about his leadership.
Have you maybe reflected on your leadership style moving forward?
No, my plan is to continue to lead, to be the only leader in the country that's fighting for an affordable Canada.
Instead, trying to turn the focus back on the Liberals.
Cabot is unhappy with the environmental policies. Wilkinson is unhappy. So I know that I'm looking forward to seeing the wall-to-wall coverage.
So what does Poilievre's response to the loss of 2 MPs and to those questions there tell us about the state of his leadership? Can he turn the focus away from the struggles that he's currently facing and back on the budget, for instance? Let's bring everyone back. Chantal, Andrew, Althea. Chantal, what did you make of, that was the first time that the reporters had a chance to ask Pierre Poilievre about any of these things. That's kind of why it became a focus of that press conference. What did you make of how he responded?
If you want to shift the focus away, you do with people like Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau do, and say, I wish him well in his future, but I have more serious things to talk about, i.e. the budget. But I think this press conference probably had more impact on caucus members who were trying to see if there would be a change in Pierre Poilievre's approach to his leadership. Than on the general public, who basically saw the usual Pierre Poilievre, the one that squandered the 20-point lead in part on tone, and the one who is 20 points behind Mark Carney as best prime minister. But if you're a Conservative MP, and we know that they exist, and we know that they talk, and you're uneasy about the style of leadership of Pierre Poilievre and the lessons not learned from the last election, you got your answer. No lessons to learn. He's good. And if you don't agree, well, it's just because you don't like him, but he doesn't want your vote.
It was kind of a curious response, because in some ways, I would argue, Andrew, he has learned some lessons, right? He did an interview with me. He did an interview with CTV. He is trying to put himself out there more, but he kind of reverted back to the stance that he had previously in terms of attacking the media and denying that there was anything to take away from the past 10 days or so.
Yeah, I mean, this is the art of being politic, or the opposite. I think the answer to that question was a big smile on his. I'm always trying to learn lessons as a leader. That's what a normal, humble person who's trying to convey humbleness anyway would say. It looks a little chippy and defensive if you just say a flat no. I think there were parts of it that were better than others. I think it's pretty fair game to say, look, Chris D'Entremont said all these things about the Liberals and Liberal policies, and now he's joining them. Catching him in his own contradictions, I think, is more fair game. And it's certainly better than the initial impulse coming out of the leader's office, which was to call him a liar and a fraud and a cheat and all these things. But generally speaking, the tone was still that kind of chippy and defensive thing. When people say, I'm not sure about his leadership style, of course, what they really mean is, I'm not sure he can win. This is the kind of Pierre Poilievre that got them up to 40% plus, but is unlikely to get them much beyond that.
I mean, he does maybe believe, Althea, that this style works, that it got him to where he is, that this is...
The leader of the opposition is where he is.
Yeah, that's right. But maybe he believes that style still has merit. I mean, that's the other way to take that. Althea, tell me what you're hearing.
Coming out of the election, there was a tone shift. There was suddenly all these Conservative MPs were doing mainstream media. I'm not sure that Pierre Poilievre would get on your show this Sunday, frankly. I'm sorry to say, Rosie. But he has reverted back to the old Pierre Poilievre. And it wasn't just saying that he hadn't learned any lesson. It was the fights that he was trying to pick with CBC and CTV. And, what I think has happened is they have decided that there's 2 things that are crucial. One, he needs to have a really strong showing in January at the leadership convention. The people who like Pierre Poilievre like him a lot. The people who dislike him a lot. Mm-hmm. The other issue is he needs to not lose the base that turned out for him in the last election campaign. But the biggest challenge to his leadership at the moment comes within caucus. So he is saying to those progressive Conservatives, the door's over here. You don't like the way I'm leading? It's not going to change. I'm going to tinker around the edges. I'm going to talk about the team around me, which we have seen in the last 2 days. But this is who I am, and this is how I'm going to lead. You don't like it? Go away. And frankly, that probably means that his leadership will be more secure in caucus.
Will be more secure in caucus, but does it improve anything for him politically, because that's, to win an election, it's something entirely different.
Well, Mark Carney has pushed him to the right, and so that's the challenge. That's his response to that.
For sure. Chantal.
Two things. I do think that a lot of the members who will be voting on his leadership will not just vote out of, I like him. And I covered Preston Manning trying to run for the Canadian Alliance and the next step in the process. And people would tell me, I like him. But they wanted to win an election. So I think that 20-point gap on who's the best prime minister between Carney and Poilievre, that's going to matter when people vote. This is not a hands-up vote in caucus. It's a secret ballot. But the other thing about how you get rid of a story like that, I wrote a not very nice column about Lucien Bouchard when he came back from having been ill and having lost a leg, about how he was staging his return to, bolster his party's fortune and manipulating people into that. And there was a news conference and he was asked about it. And his answer was, the next time I almost die, I will try to do better. That's the answer you give.
And that's why we like having you here.
And I still talk.
The other thing he has going for him is the absence of available alternatives.
That's right.
None of the names which conceivably could be raised as a possibility of replacing him poll as well as he does, even though he himself is 20 points behind Carney in the polls. So if you're dissatisfied with Poilievre's leadership and you're a conservative, you're kind of stuck with him at this point until somebody else emerges who looks a little better.
Yeah, because we should also say that the Conservative Party is not polling as badly as the leader is, right? That is also
no, he's a drag on the party brand.
Yeah, Chantal.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't think Mark Carney outpolled Justin Trudeau at this time last year.
That's true. I think that, yes, that's also true. Last word to you, Althea.
Oh, where to take this? I don't know that the people who are that upset with Pierre Poilievre are actually going to show up in January, to be honest. Like, that's $2,000 investment. The Ontario Progressive Conservative Convention is the same weekend. I don't expect that Mr. Poilievre really will face a challenge.
Unless we get a couple more floor crossers.
Yes.
Well, I don't actually expect anybody to join the grids. I think the rumors are that if the people who are dissatisfied leave, they will leave to sit as independents. And what they need and what they're looking for is safety in numbers. I'm not sure we're there yet.
And so the likelihood that there's any more impact on his leadership in the immediate future?
We didn't know 2 weeks ago that this was going to happen. People usually don't publicize their thinking before. We never saw those Canadian Alliance MPs wake up one morning to sit outside of the Stockwell Days caucus. So I agree, the safety and numbers thing. Lots of people are having lots of conversations, frankly.
I have another unless.
Yeah, well, quickly.
Unless the Liberals contrive to lose on the budget vote and force an election.
Okay, well, I'm not entertaining that one.
I don't think they're trying to lose the budget vote, but it doesn't seem like they're trying to win it either. I think that's a bigger issue.
I think that's fair to say. And let's be clear, that's only because I don't know if I have a second election in a year in me. Thank you all for that. That is at issue on the National. We're going to continue this conversation and talk about Quebec's controversial Bill 2 and the potential exodus of doctors from that province. Catch that on YouTube or the At Issue podcast. Now back to Adrian in Toronto.
Thanks, Rosie. Coming up, a Nova Scotia man runs more than 60 kilometers 4 days in a row.
First mile was nothing but snow and rain and wind in my face. And I thought, what am I doing? I'm not going to do this.
Sounds lovely. His inspiration for going the distance in our moment. This is Herbie Sakalaskas right before he began a, get this, 276-kilometer run on the Cabot Trail in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. So he completed that trek in 4 days, raising over $41,000 for charity in memory of his dad. Tonight, that little run through the woods is our moment.
I ran between 60 and 80 kilometers a day over 4 days. It's a lot of up and downs, And there's really no flat leg on the Cabot Trail. This was definitely a bigger challenge. I did this whole thing in memory of my father, Simon, who passed away in 2018 of a heart attack. I had to raise about $30,000 for the Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation for a locust device, which is a CPR machine. The first mile was nothing but snow and rain and wind in my face. And I thought, what am I doing? I'm not going to do this. I had all those people watching and donating. I couldn't let them down. I just had to tough them through it and get it done.
Good job. Good job, Andre. Good job, Herb.
There was a bunch of people waiting for me where the Cape Breton Cabot Trail ends. That was pretty emotional. It means the world, not only just to complete it, but to do it and to raise the $41,000. It's a wicked feeling.
Just a little perspective here. The Cabot Trail does this annual relay race where they take 17 people to run that 276 kilometers. He ran the whole thing all by himself. Good on you. From all of us at The National, thanks for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.